said, my name's Tal. I've been with Appleroot for about 10 years and in various capacities. But for the most part, what I do is I do test prep. I teach SAT, ACT, and PSAT. That's what I do online full time these days. But I also present, as you can see today. And the three things that Appleroot really specializes in are the test prep, academic tutoring, and then something we'll get into today, which is EF coaching. So we got to start with what are executive functions. It's a set of processes. We all have them. It's a spectrum. So people have executive function skills in different capacities. And what they involve is managing yourself, managing your own resources, monitoring your behaviors, and setting goals and attaining them. So we're going to talk today about what some of these functions are, how to develop them, and just some tools for effective executive function coaching towards the end. Even without any sort of coaching, we are all developing these skills and improving over time. So the brain is developing, until 20s, 30s, and even adults sometimes require executive function coaching. But especially when you're a teenager or you're in this kind of phase that a lot of our students are of going from sophomore to junior year, or junior to senior year of high school, or even going to undergrad, you'll see a lot of development with or without coaching, but really a lot of room for improvement at that age in particular. You see the three pillars on the bottom here of working memory, cognitive flexibility, and self-control. But all these things are part of EF. So some may be really good at planning, but less good at then being following through, right? So you can set the goals, but maybe the task completion is lacking. Others might have really strong time management, right? But others might be really weaker with that or can't inhibit certain behaviors like checking the phone while they're supposed to be studying. Again, these are skills and everyone's different. So it's, just because one person is strong in planning does not mean they will necessarily be strong in another area and vice versa. These aren't in a hierarchical order. And by definition, if a student has ADHD, that means they're lacking in some of these skills. And a lot of LDs, you'll see that. You'll see just executive function skills that lag behind, or just one or two skills that aren't as developed as others. And that can be hard to identify, but once you do, it can really open some avenues. So some of the foundational skills that we've touched on, there's controlling impulses, working memory, which is how much you can keep in your brain at one time. So with ACT and SAT, we work on that a lot. How can we maybe split up paragraphs or passages to keep not as much information in our brain? Controlling emotions, right? Frustration or anger or fear or anxiety, right? It's feeling those emotions but not letting them take over. Flexibility and adaptability, and then task initiation, and then sustained attention on tasks. These are all some of the major skills. And then some of the more advanced skills would be planning, prioritizing, organizing, a lot of the skills that my students sometimes aren't as good at, or in high school, I know I wasn't quite as good at. There's a lot of different parts of time management that we would break down piece by piece by piece, setting a goal and persisting towards it. And then what I think of as really the cornerstone of executive function is metacognition, which is thinking about how you think, self-awareness. And I think that's the beauty of tutoring, but also of coaching, of mentoring, is if you can help someone think about the way they think, it can change everything. Change your ability to become better at planning and prioritizing and organizing, because you have a better sense of where you're going wrong and where your skills are, where you shine. So as I said, we are all developing these skills as we age. And regardless of whether you're doing coaching or you're just developing them naturally, these skills aren't just about school, right? So anything will transfer to life. I think some of this is fairly obvious, but if you're better at planning and you're better at, organizing your time, then you may have better social relationships, right? You're not late. People know that you prioritize their time as well. These skills are highly transferable, and they are not just for kids. This is for adults too. I would say the main times we see EF coaching really come into play would be that transition from like middle school to high school. It's a really hard one. So that was 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. Then there's another one around junior year can be really hard. Transition to junior, senior year and college applications, tough time. So EF coaching can be really helpful there. And then sometimes the transition from high school to undergrad can be a big one where you're on your own for the first time and just really having to try to plan things out that you haven't had to in that way before. But we really see it at all stages. So those are just 3 of the main ones. This is just another look at kind of the spectrum and how everything is tied in. And being able to regulate yourself and understand how you're thinking, that metacognition piece, and how you learn, that's all just very much tied to executive function, right? Because if you understand the way you learn and your style, it helps focus in all these other things. It helps you hone in those abilities. We ask a lot of questions, whether this is a group class, but especially one-on-one tutoring or coaching. A great tutor will really just not offer that much and more just ask questions, right? So what do you think about this particular question? What do you think might be difficult about it? If we went wrong, where do we go wrong? How confident are you that next time you can fix that? Right, and we'll talk through some of those, but it's all just setting up with questions. It helps students understand when we need help and understand that it's important to ask for help, right, if you need it. And then maybe we have several different strategies. What is a trigger to make this strategy useful here versus this strategy on another question? We also look a lot at break time. So for students with extra time on a test, that's a blessing and a curse because, yeah, we'll benefit from the extended time. We need it, but then we're there for 5 hours rather than 3. So better figure out how to preserve mental stamina and really take smart breaks. Those are all things that people don't often think about, but when they do, it's really helpful. Makes a difference. We don't often think about like, how am I doing? How's my learning going? And exploring why. So what this comes back to is self-awareness. And I think the quote on the bottom of this slide is really important. So not just understanding where you are weak or weaker. Students who know what they are good at are much better off than those who only know everything they are bad at. I mean, positive reinforcement and visualization is crucial, really, in most aspects of life. But I see a lot of people coming in saying, I'm bad at math or I'm bad at biology. And it's important to reframe that, right? Because usually what happened is, well, they didn't have a great teacher or they fell behind or they didn't like it. But it's all relative, right? So like, oh, you're bad at math. That means you prefer the verbal stuff and you want to get people talking about what we're good at, right? And then with math, it's okay. I'm not as strong with math as I am with the reading and writing, but that just means we'll work harder at it, think differently about it. And that's great that verbal is going so well because it means we can put less energy into that. So making sure to highlight positives, always really huge. And at the age that I work with of 15, 16, 17, I'm sure some of you are that age or parents or guardians or educators of people that age. You know that what comes from mom and dad can fall on deaf ears. I will say the more positive stuff that comes, the more likely they are to take the negative or at least the constructive criticism. So as a tutor, I was just really big on let's always find the positives and highlight them because everyone's better when they feel like they're succeeding. So we talked about this practice of self-inquiry. If you can look back at what's happened before, that will help you move forward. We don't care about this SAT question. We care about if we saw something like it in the future, would we be able to attack it? What would we do? Right, so you look at a question and think about how did that work? Or if it didn't, where did I go wrong? I'll often ask students, if I lost you, where did I lose you? Because people don't want to just say, I'm confused, or like, what? So if you ask a specific question, they might say, oh yeah, this one part confused me. We can work back through it. But yeah, a lot of it is just like, let's dig into this a bit, let's explore this, and you can get the student talking. That's really a big key because they just want someone who's on their team and working with them to help explore how they think. And it doesn't have to be a rigid process. It's really just a curiosity. That's where the questions come in. And anytime there's a failure or setback, we need to build that tolerance for frustration. That's something that a great EF coach would be really good at is, hey, we're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. This is a safe place to make mistakes. And that's how we learn, right? We learn through experience and we learn through failure. So it's okay to try things that aren't going to work, right? This is just an endeavor that we're going on together. And yeah, let's just see if this works. And if not, that's okay. We'll try something different. That takes the pressure off, because if it doesn't work, it's not, oh, I failed. It's okay, that didn't work for me. There must be a different method that will. I think that also helps with just persistence on task. Kathleen Kriza, her chunk chew check method, I think is really the right way to teach. A lot of math teachers especially do not do this. This relates back to working memory. If a teacher packs in too much without letting students practice and check, then learning won't be optimal. When I taught in Fulton County in Atlanta in a high school setting, if I just noticed, I could see it in students' eyes. If I talked for like 20-ish minutes about something, towards the end of those 20 minutes, I could see people start to zone out no matter what it was, right? There's almost no topic interesting enough. You can just keep going at it for more than like 15 minutes at a time. The general rule is for every 10 minutes you teach something new, the brain needs a couple minutes to chew on that, whether that's a practice question or 2 or 3, or just some exercises. A lot of times what I remember in math is they would teach something and they'd say, okay, now you know it, and we're going to test you on it. And then on the test, it was something kind of like that, but different and harder. It usually feels that way because there wasn't enough of a chew and a check of, do we actually understand this, or do we only know how to do this one problem? So I even am conscious of it right now, right? We're on this one slide that's very wordy. The key is don't just give content, right? Make sure to give time for people to check, right? You're going to ask questions if you have them. Build in the time for students to chew on it, and then check down the road. That's how we really learn. You need to reinforce it in a couple of weeks. Famous name in academics, John Dewey. We don't learn from the experience itself. We learn from reflecting on that experience. True. So how do we teach students to become more adaptable? I think part of it is just understanding that everything's relative. All students are different. Each situation is different. So don't paint with a broad brush. It's not black and white. What might have worked in geometry might not work in pre-calc based on the subject or maybe just the teacher's style. We talked about tolerating frustration and building that tolerance. So we're curious, we're trying new things. If they don't work, that's okay. Let's take some risks and try different things, because if we don't, we won't know if it works. Coming back to ACT, SAT prep, on the reading section, there's a lot of variation for what people can do. So, we don't know, maybe they need to do passages out of order, or maybe they just need to do a better job of taking simple notes. But if we don't try out different things to find a comfort zone, we won't know. We won't be able to improve dramatically. Something that I definitely noticed as a teacher in the public school system that really changed the way I teach and just kind of my whole thought process on teaching is I would see students who presented as unmotivated, like they didn't care. The typical kind of what a teacher would judge as, this is not the best student, right? He just doesn't try, doesn't care. And when you dig at that a little bit, a lot of times we're confusing that lack of motivation with we're thinking it's okay, this person's not motivated, this person's not doing well. But what it really is they feel like they're lagging behind. They feel like, yeah, I was lost a week ago and the math teachers just continued moving on. That's going to make people shut down. And a defense mechanism might be they're just going to present as like they don't care, because that protects them from feeling like they're failing. But if you even, like with some of those students, like if I would talk with them a bit and say, okay, so where are we really struggling? And it might have been square one. So let's start on the basics, right? Give them a win. Hey, can you do these two problems? I'm going to do one for you. Can you do one like it? And just like one win and one, setting of praise from a teacher could make all the difference. And then all of a sudden they're asking questions in class, right? Or maybe it's more gradual. But I do really think that it's important to understand that just because there's a lack of motivation doesn't necessarily mean anything other than, hey, maybe we just need some EF coaching, or this person doesn't feel comfortable with that topic. That's, I think, intimately related to shame. Students who are having academic trouble often have these feelings of, I'm not as good as my fellow students, my friends are doing better. And so this negative messaging gets internalized. That's where the emotion regulation comes in, and being able to talk to yourself in a positive way. Really hard to do, something that it's revolutionary for a lot of people because they don't never think about how they talk to themselves. And most of us are really not very nice to ourselves. But yeah, sometimes we just have skills that lag behind, right? Maybe we just needed to reinforce fractions before we moved on to this part of math. So it's important to understand this doesn't define you. We're not fundamentally flawed. We're just lagging behind, and that's something we can work on. We can change, we can highlight, and that might change everything. Again, this curious nature of this is a challenge, it's an unsolved problem. It's not something that we're bad at or something that we need to get better at. Right? This is, okay, what's going on here? Let's figure it out. Let's dig into this together. And students, almost without fail, will buy into that if they know you're working with them to solve it. Sensory issues can impair executive function. One of the big ones here is proprioception, which has to do with touch mainly. But some people, you might see them like using a fidget spinner, or, I've got a few little things here, like a little ball that I would throw around. And as a teacher, if I saw a student doing a lot of that, the initial reaction might be, oh, they're not paying attention. Some people need it, right? So some people are going to do better, even if right now they pick up something and just kind of mess with it the rest of the time, they'll be able to focus in more. And that's just based on you and how you feel. I've got a new student with an auditory processing difficulty. And so for her, testing is really tough because she's all drawn in all these different directions. Of course, a lot of different people walking through, or visual stimulation can be distracting. Of course, touch, smell, taste, all that stuff can affect EF. So just understanding that this is one more thing to bring into the mix, part of the equation, and will be more important for some students than others. So now we're getting into the 5 big keys to EF coaching. The big one, I believe this comes, like this is true of teaching and mentoring, but just in tutoring, but you have to put the relationship first. The student needs to know that the coach cares. The 5 C's, with one of them being a bit of a stretch, self-control, but the 5 C's are self-control, compassion, collaboration, consistency, and celebration. The student knows, the best teachers and tutors are the ones who have empathy and who care and demonstrate they care, right? I think that's one of my main skills as a teacher, is that I deeply care about my students' success, right? And I want them to do well and open up opportunities, right? And grow. And it's a collaborative effort. So, right, the best types of coaches are not, it's not a guru who is teaching you, do as I do, here's the path I'm laying. It's giving the student the tool, collaborating together, and then really actively shifting the responsibility to them. Consistency. So when you start EF coaching, maybe you do 2 meetings, 30 minutes a week. You would want to shift that pretty quickly to 30 minutes once a week. And then ultimately maybe every 2 weeks and then every month, right? Checking in and celebrating, hey, look at this. You barely need me now because look how far you've come with your own skill set, your planning, your whatever we're working on. But with all of those, the relationship with the student takes center stage, as it should be. And again, a challenge is not a deficit, it's a problem to solve. Life is full of those, right? Listing things out is good, right? Let's lay out all of our unsolved problems and prioritize, knowing that we can't do it all. And then together we're modeling, like, how do we do this? Because, everyone's got problems. I think high school juniors have a ton of them because if they work really, really hard and it's a tough age, but we can model how to set up this list of problems and then how to prioritize, right? And be proactive. You don't want to have to be reactive because that's stressful. And what tends to happen is when you lay it out and you solve one problem, it's a snowball effect. Others begin to resolve too. It just becomes an easier pathway. We are building skills, so I always want to put it on the student. Where should we start? What do you think? Any ideas? What are we solving for? I do believe that the students' ideas and insights matter. I trust my students, but those types of questions really show that. We're partners. We're teaching the skills of identifying problems and then generating solutions. Those are life skills. And I think a lot of people are really lacking in them and don't know that they can improve. They don't know that that's something that we can really coach and work on. Thinking about planning. So how do we do what we do? Again, all these questions to help them become reflective. So what was your goal? Let's say we're talking about an exam, final exam. What score goal did you have? Where did you start? What strategies did you use? What materials did you have? Did that help and how so? Would you do that again? What would you change? So all of this is just a thoughtful, it can be really a grind. We're building skills for the long term. Every little win is a big win. It can be so draining for a student to work on something and feel like they're not succeeding. And it's really easy to internalize the negative. We learn to disregard the positive stuff. Every little step, even if it's just, hey, I've got these apps downloaded. Good work. I've started to keep my phone on the other side of the room while I do homework. Amazing, right? These are little steps that you really need to say, hey, that's a huge, huge win, right? And if you find it helpful, right, let's monitor this. Let's see how we find it helpful. And it's just positive feedback cycle. And make sure you show the student, hey, look at what you did. Look at how this helped you, right? And so this was you, right? You changed this behavior. It affected the outcome. And knowing that and internalizing it will help future outcomes. Second big key to EF coaching is shifting the ownership. I believe that a first session is truly crucial, whether it's tutoring or coaching, and really even talking to the parents or guardians and student beforehand a bit. What drives the student? Some are really competitive with their siblings or their friends or just within themselves. Some aren't at all, and they just are, they believe in social justice and they believe in what is right, but they don't care as much about their own work. So thinking about like, well, what is it that you want to do with your life? And what do you enjoy? And what do you see as your path to get there? Right. But you don't want to just kind of direct, you must do well on this. Figure out what drives that student. And it can be really, really super different. Some people just want to do well for their parents. Some people want to do well to help or to have a tutor be impressed. And others, again, are intrinsically motivated. So that's just something you want to talk about and figure out before you even start. What is success? What drives you? And on that note, whose goals are we serving? I think there's sometimes some bleeding into parental goals and they're projecting their own needs onto their kids, right? We got to go to this school. We got to get this score. And, to a certain extent, that's inevitable, but it'd be better if we could meet them where they are. The big thing with coaching is if there's an academic goal and the student doesn't care, or at least it should really be totally student motivated if possible. But at the very least, something the student embraces this, I need to do this. If not, it's usually not successful unless you use the carrot and stick punishment reward, which has its own issues. So it's just important to get buy-in, right? Whose goals are we serving? We're serving your goals. We're opening up opportunities for you. I'm here to help you. And right, that kind of shifts the onus to the student a little bit. A lot of times, I think we all just kind of jump to, we've got to fix this. right? We gotta change this, we gotta fix this, we gotta do something different. It's more just like, let's build a relationship. We're building trust, we're building rapport, and it's all questions. Active listening, which is just really repeating what someone says in other words, makes you feel good. I like it when people do it to me. So even if I just say something very simple and they say, so what I'm hearing you say is this. So yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. I feel heard. Uh, Empathize, right? It's harder for some people to do it, but I want to say like, how are you doing? Some students don't love the small talk and just want to get into the task at hand. Others really benefit from just taking a minute to reflect and like, man, I had this one class that's really killing me. And so, yeah, you can relate, talk to them a little bit and connect and then move on. This is not like a one task we have to fix. We talked about the frustration tolerance. This is what's called the zone of proximal development, where you're outside of your comfort zone, but within your limit. And we have to kind of poke and prod a little bit about where that is. We want to move students out of a comfort zone, right? So make these easy things for them, like phone or TV or whatever, make those a bit harder and make the harder necessary things a bit easier, right? So that will be a little bit uncomfortable at times. We don't want to go to full like stress, but we do need to live in the discomfort zone a little bit. That can help build that frustration tolerance. As much as we highlight the positives, we also want to make sure the student has ownership over what didn't go right. So that's just where you start. I got to see, okay, well, that's not the end of the story. Where did things go wrong? Which part of the test did you not do well on? And if they don't know, we need to dig into it, right? And so they can't rely on you, the coach, to fix it for them, but you also don't want to judge them or shame them. This is like, okay, I understand. I'm not judging you at all for that. What's our goal? We want to turn that C to what, a B plus, an A. Let's figure out how to do it, right? But that makes it clear that it's ultimately the student's responsibility. A lot of we, right? As the coach, you don't want to do much I. Third key is understanding the complexity of a quote unquote simple task. No task is actually simple. If a student's struggling with EF issues, the simplest thing that we see as simple might be really not that way for them. Something that, for us might be as simple as, hey, you need to set up a calendar app on your phone. Really, for someone who's struggling with task initiation or planning or organization, you need to break that down. It's okay, let's figure out the app. All right, I'm going to be here while you download it. Let's open it up. All right, let's just try setting up one hour long session on the calendar. If you want to repeat it, how do we do that? So literally going through a calendar app and just painstakingly step by step. Sometimes those aren't needed. So make sure you're not being redundant or like over analytical. Ask questions to figure out if the student's doing all right. And if not, they can tell you where they're having a breakdown or where they're having issues in the process. So really breaking it down into the nitty gritty. Just an example here. So like write down the homework every week is not enough. It's like, where does the homework live? What part of the assignment book? Is every subject in the same part? Can we color code? What page do we go to for US history? And where are we going for statistics? Right, so each step more manageable. If you do that at the outset, it becomes much easier as you go. So it seems like a simple process, but there's usually a lot involved with that. You want to help students think about where do they get distracted. So maybe a transition where you're going from one parent's house to another, or from school to home, or class to class. Sometimes those transitions are just hubs for like little things we lose and might struggle with that. So just acknowledging it, thinking about it, anticipating, hey, I know that when I go from second period to third period, I'm often just getting distracted in the halls, or I'm leaving my calculator here. So just acknowledging it, we can work with that, right? And it's not a problem. It's just something that, hey, this isn't affecting you the way you want it to, how can we maybe work with that and change it? Remembering also that task is not just like set a task, do it. There's initiating it, which often for me is actually the hardest part. So there's a little bit of procrastination. You'll see a lot of like, I know I can do this, but just starting it is the thing that I don't want to do. Some people struggle with the follow through. And others can do all of it, but just like have this little thing about finishing it, putting the finishing touches on. Some people struggle with multiple or none, or just one of these parts of task completion. But I'd say the most common one I see is the procrastination and the initiation. Something we'll do for a test, but also important for coaching, is future sketch. So you plan backwards. We're prepping for the May SAT, so let's make sure we're leading into that really well and work backwards. Look at all the steps. So if it is SAT, where's the test? Do you know where it is? Have you been to that parking lot? What time are you going to wake up? How are you going to set an alarm? What are you going to bring with you and set out on the table Friday night before the test? Do we need to do anything in the morning, routine wise? What are you going to bring? All that stuff. So an example would be if you know that you've got an assignment due Friday and the teacher's office hours end on Wednesday, if you start on Thursday, you're already kind of setting yourself up for a bit of a failure. If you have trouble, you won't be able to go to office hours. So don't think, hey, this is a problem for future me. Think, hey, this is a problem for future me. Let me make sure that I'm nice to myself in the future. And all of that is just imagining yourself and making your future life easier is our goal. The fourth key to coaching is creating smart systems. And I think this is one of the major functions of an EF coach, one of the harder things a lot of times, helping a student organize everything, digital, physical, and just thoughts. Starting macro, and then that helps you organize at the micro level. So if you've got all of your school in one place and work in one place and whatever, video games here, then you get into school, and then within that, you've got each subject. And within that, you've got each unit and so on. But you have to start from the top. And questions are always a good way to get at that. So how do you organize things now? Sometimes people just, they're like, I don't know. I just remember it. And if it's not working, then we say, well, what can we change? How do you track your tests? Do you have a planner? And again, all these what, where, when, how questions. And nothing is too broken down. We really want to get into the very specifics. A lot of this is just about pathways and habits. So helping them understand, well, yeah, this habit is no good. What I do is I work for 30 minutes, and then when I take a break, I tend to go too long on the break because I get sunken into TV show or music or whatever. And that's something that an EF coach will often have to do, is nudge that development of those habits. Hey, have you been doing this? And sometimes people will start a habit and be doing great about putting stuff in the planner. And then as things go well, they'll kind of do less of it and then become less effective. So you want to help students become automatic. That's where a parent, it's really hard. I mean, even the word nudge there, right? Oftentimes kids, especially like sophomore, junior, senior year, aren't going to take it that well from mom or dad. And so that's where a coach or a tutor can come in and help with that stuff, right? It's less annoying if I'm checking in rather than, mom's over their shoulder saying, hey, you put that in your calendar, right? We develop resentment just because it's natural, remembering being at that age. We talked about like the proprioception and sensory issues, but overstimulation can definitely interfere with EF skills. Like seeing that room stresses me out, but too much clutter can certainly distract. So you want to have a clean workspace, both on your computer, but also on your desk and at home. Just so we only, we don't have that much attention. We only want to, we want to use it sparingly, right? We don't want to have so much going on. People probably remember Marie Kondo a few years back, but decluttering, only keep what sparks joy, or in this case, keep what's really essential, right? So even just setting that out and doing it can help, dumping your backpack out, minimizing. And then if you really don't have a system, you want to build it from the top down. This is where, again, coaching can help a lot. So how every system, I mean, every student's different. So a system for one person might be very different for another. I'm happy keeping everything on my phone. Some people really can't do that and will get distracted by apps or whatever. And so maybe they need the hard copy big calendar that a lot of coaches love. So it's a process, it's exploring with the student. Labels are important, and just making things easy, right? Just easy to pick out, easy to identify. It gives you more of an opportunity to be efficient and waste less time generally. I think what's hard for a coach also is what might be good for me just might be really not good for my student. So that's where questions come in, not assuming like, hey, this is the right way to do it. So you got to figure out what drives them, right? And honestly, there are definitely some apps and things out there that I don't even know about yet. For me, like if I know that sometimes I get sucked into the news a bit too much. And so if I know that I need to just detach, I just literally, go onto my settings for internet and I disable JavaScript. So I can't get into anything, which is like a very, very ancient type of solution. But for me, it works. There's also apps like Blocker and all this stuff that will help you limit screen time. But yeah, it's a customized system which you guys are building together, coach and student. And there's no such thing as a good system, right? There are certainly bad systems, but a good system is just anyone that gets used consistently. Again, we're developing habits. Once you have a system for yourself, there's less external thought and just work on your end. The system does it for you. Creating that automaticity helps students think about other stuff and be less anxious because they know they've got this system in place. So I don't have that gnawing thought of, am I forgetting this? Or is there a test I don't know about? Because I know my system's working. This is that big calendar I mentioned. So a lot of coaches really like just having that big thing on over your desk, and then you circle the dates with tests, and you have everything marked up and color coded. Same with digitally, making sure that not only in real life on your desk and in your room, but also on your computer or laptop or tablet or phone, all of the above. Bookmarks with like Appleruth website or this class resource, etc. Google Calendar is really big. That's what I use. Notice that this person's built-in breaks. That can be really nice. That's something that a coach can encourage. But yeah, scheduling in downtime, tracking short-term and long-term projects, scheduling repeating sessions. This would be an example of probably a college student, right, who's had EF coaching and knows that because on Tuesday they've got a math test and on Wednesday they've got English, they need to build in some time for the Wednesday and Thursday tests, but also realistically, right after your math exam, you can't just go and study. So look at that, 2.5 hours built in from 11 to 1:30 on Tuesday for sleep and coffee. I think many people just don't think about that, both in adult life and also just adolescent life, but building in break time, really huge. This is a good place to start. This person's got a lot of redundancies in their backpack and some interesting things in the first place, but pare it down, just bring what you need and make sure it's organized. I think that a lot of people benefit from working in one space, so like having a designated study area, whether it's your room, but others can't be around their video game console or certain temptations. Others do well with moving from place to place. They need to be at a coffee shop one day, right, or this other place. So exploring, but realizing that if you're in a more disciplined environment that is helping you focus, then you have to rely less on actual work and willpower to get yourself there. Right? Make your life easier. Some people can listen to music when they study. Others really can't. Right? But others, and chewing gum can help. but just minimizing your distractions, understanding that if you're going to do something, that's what you're going to do one at a time, right? Try not to let one activity bleed into another, because then we'll be less effective and we'll enjoy each one less. This is another one that stresses me out when we see this many things, right? A student shares their screen, we've got like 9,752 unread emails. But just thinking about like what app notifications can I turn off, right? For me, turning off email notifications on my phone was big because I would always get sucked into work where I didn't, it wasn't like an emergency room response time that was needed. As long as I checked it every few hours, even when I'm managing other people, that's fine, right? But if I was getting the emails constantly, it was just too hard to detach, right? So think about what can we turn off? And on that note, what can we inhibit? What do we need to what impulses do we need to control? So if there's this standard thing that like I get distracted and I just want to go and play this video game, make that more difficult. If you have to really study, you got to think about like how you can change that, right? If maybe there's a healthier distraction. So like maybe if when you take a break, which is good, right now you're taking too long and going on your phone. Maybe take a more focused 5 or 10-minute break where you're doing a couple of word searches, where you're just doing some drawings. It might not be as easy at first, but it won't be any less fulfilling. And if you build that pathway, it often will be a more fulfilling and I guess, a break that I think will fill your tank more than it would drain you, which is often the worry. A coach can help think about, hey, if you're not great at planning, if that's what's tough for you, what can we do to make that easier, right? So is it just a place? Is it, again, like putting the phone on the other side of the room? Is it taking apps off the phone, right? All sorts of different things that might work. Initially, students will probably resist it, but you got to figure out if it's going to work. And once you do it, rip the Band-Aid off. It's usually not. Students realize that they're not really losing it out on anything. We use the stopwatch and lap function a lot just on the smartphone, helpful for timing drills, but also just to understand how much time it takes. A lot of people aren't great at understanding how much time they've been doing something. So also just knowing when is it time to go and take a nap or go put something down. You want to build frustration tolerance, but you don't want to get too deep into that. You don't want to be over frustrated. Again, building in break time and having this division of work and play. So if you are working, just working, you don't have the basketball game in the background. You don't have, 3 other things that you're trying to do. But then same thing when you're playing, you don't want to be distracted and be thinking about studying. You want to say, okay, I've got an hour, I'm going to go play basketball, right? Or I've got an hour, I'm going to go to be with a friend, right? Get coffee or whatever. But those healthy boundaries are important, understanding that it's really important to build in the playtime, which is hard for students. My students don't sleep much, they work super hard. So just understanding that building that division is really important, really difficult. The last key, as we kind of wind down today, is the self-regulation, self-care, and self-monitoring part. And some of these are just very logical. I mean, exercise is good for most people, right? You get some downtime. It's almost meditative for a lot of people. You get the endorphins and the blood flow going. And then it can be an effective break between work. It can actually, it's part of that chunk chew check where it's like you can learn something, and actually it's proven that if you exercise afterwards or sleep right afterwards, those are both things that can help it sink in. Rather than work, things will start to fade out of your brain. And I mentioned sleep. I mean, sleep's the big one. Even when I was in law school, I would have this feeling at like 1 or 2 a.m. of like, I know I'm not ready for this test yet, but I'm exhausted. And I could feel it. I could feel like I wasn't learning well and I wasn't retaining things. So instead of staying up all night, like I think a lot of my friends would do, I would sleep from about 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. And just that, I mean, obviously it was horrible waking up at 5 and having a few more hours to study, but I swear that was the better method. right? If you sleep, you need to sleep. And then if you need to sleep, you should sleep. And you're not going to benefit from just like prolonging that and trying to pack more in. We can't focus, we can't regulate ourselves if we're not getting at least a decent amount of sleep. And I'm aware that like 8-9 hours is out of the question for a lot of students. Like juniors aren't like laugh at me when I say that, but at least try to get like 4 or 6. I mean, less than that, it really, you can see students get drained right before your eyes. Active breaks are good, even short breaks to let your glucose stores replenish. A lot of times people are staring at screens for too long, but no matter what, every 20, 30 minutes, you want to take a short break as much as you're able to. We've talked about this self-talk. So coaches can help students be less critical and attend to this inner dialogue. So is my self-talk helping me or hurting me, right? If I'm telling myself I'm bad at math, what is that doing for you? And what might be better? Would it help more to say, there's some parts of math I really don't like and I'm having trouble with. Like that sounds better to me. I can work with that. You got to figure out, are they cultivating this positive and good higher self and inner coach? Or is it running rampant? Again, this is for life, not just for academics. Because you want to be kind to yourself, right? A mistake is just a mistake that we learn from, right? And wins are more important. Celebrate those and more will come. We are not great as a society at seeking help. So helping students understand that they can and should, and sometimes it's welcomed. Here are some various ways to do that, right? Emailing your teacher, going to office hours are great. Interacting with teachers like that is actually smart and important anyway, in case you need a recommendation down the road, but also teachers appreciate that type of active involvement. And the reality is that advocating for yourself and asking for what you need is not only important, it's nurturing. We need to do that, right? This is your body and your inner self telling you what you need. So try to figure out who can help you, right? And how to get that help. Again, that can be a really hard thing for some people. So help them learn to identify who is the right person. And for each person to be different. Hey, do you have a teacher you really trust? Or, it could just be brother or sister or mom or dad or cousin, or counselor, right? Or principal. You have to kind of talk to them. Who do you feel comfortable with? Who do you think would help you? Usually people know, they just might be afraid or unsure. You can help them think how to approach and when. Just turning students into better advocates for themselves in general. So as we close today, these are, I think, the high-level takeaways when it comes to EF and EF coaching. Big one that every great EF coach will do is keep the relationship primary. Again, every good teacher does that too. If it's one-on-one, you need to make sure that that relationship is cultivated and nurtured, and the student feels that you care, right? And it's a positive relationship. That will help shift ownership to the student if they trust you as the coach, right? That helps us say, hey, we're working together, but ultimately our goal is to get you to be able to do this. We're building your skills so you don't need me. We don't have to meet twice a week or once a week. Breaking down simple tasks and understanding that can actually be really complex, right? So one little thing is actually probably many parts. We want to help create and implement smart systems. And then self-regulation, self-care, that last piece, self-monitoring, which, man, I mean, that's a lifelong struggle, but something that if students start working on it at a young age can improve a great, great deal. That does it for our presentation today. We've got some time for questions. Again, what Appleruth does, our 3 cornerstones are academic tutoring, which is in school for a class subject, test prep, which is the standardized test plus AP exams, and then EF coaching. We're going to put a link in the chat. If you want to get more information, you can talk 15 minutes free of charge with a program advisor. And one of the coolest things about our EF coaching is we do these diagnostics where we do what's called a mind print, which is basically a mock test for your brain. And they're super cool, tells you a lot. It allows our assignments manager to look at our coaches and that student and match them. For $150, you get a 30-minute consultation and then a custom plan, which again, I think will often be 30-minute sessions twice a week to start, then maybe once a week, but it can really, there's a lot of variation on that. So that link should be in the chat. And we've got what, probably 7-8 minutes for questions. So please feel free to throw those my way. And if you're satisfied, I'm not keeping you prisoner, feel free to call it a night, and thank you for joining. We're also launching a poll right now too, for those of you who want more info. So I'm going to open the Q&A. So first question, I'm actually not sure. Rakrandu is, did you say Rakrandu is what you use? No, I wonder if that's referring to when I'm finding myself drawn to my phone and drawn to like the news and social media. What I do is I disable JavaScript on my phone. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but there's a lot of different ways that people can monitor their screen time, a lot of different apps. And I'm sure that like what works for me isn't going to work for a lot of 15 or 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds. You just explore with them, you know, hey, where do you feel like you're wasting your time and how can we limit that? No rush at all or pressure, but I'm gonna leave it open for a few more minutes for questions. Okay, here's one. So this is just one of my best tips for college students. I mean, for one thing, I think acknowledging that getting a coach for even like a couple weeks or a month is probably a good idea because college students oftentimes have a better sense of self. The hard part is honestly that transition. So we see a lot of EF coaching for new freshmen in college because they're coming off of high school life where, you know, maybe they don't have to do everything for themselves. And all of a sudden it's this huge shift. So, I mean, the tips are often going to be about planning and organization. I mean, different things will work for different people. So I have to talk to the person, but like, what is it that's the struggle? Is it attending class, right? If that's the case, then we just need to be better about setting alarms and being more structured. Is it, I'm afraid about this one test, right? Then we dig into that one class, the teaching style and the assignments and where it's all living. A lot of times college students lack with organization, papers everywhere, instead of keeping it all in one binder. The question here is, do you work with high functioning autism students? And the answer, I mean, I definitely have, especially with test prep, but the answer is definitely yes. We work with a lot of students with learning differences, which ranges from ADHD to processing to autism spectrum. But yeah, definitely. And I think that all of it comes back to trusting your student. And for me, when I work with students with LDs, I feel like that's more poignant than ever. Because finding that process is just going to be so unique and so different for that person. So yeah, it's just trying to kind of get in their heads and work with them and just think about, hey, this might not work for everyone, but what might work for me? But yes, absolutely. And there's certain of our coaches who work more with students with autism or dyslexia or other LDs. A few more minutes. Looks like we're good. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Alparuth. I'm going to answer one more here. But the people at Alparuth, the PAs, are often, like many of them have been tutors. They're all very approachable. They're not going to give you a hard sell. So if you just have questions in general about the company or about just EF coaching or test prep, feel free to reach out. It will be a good experience. All right, last question is route learning recommended if it works for students? You know, I actually don't know that much about that. That's something that I'd be happy to look into a little bit. And I'm sure if you reach out, probably some of our coaches know more. But I think anything, like we said, any system that works is a good system. And it's super different for every person. So you try things out. If it doesn't work, you realize, oh, this didn't work. That's a learning experience. And if it does, then great. And yes, we do one-on-one consultations at that number below, the Calendar link, I'm sorry, in the chat. All right, really appreciate you all joining. Hope it was informative, and hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Thanks so much.